Oh, that damage. I've played around with Bishop for about 10 hours in total now, exploring different areas, changing around masteries, and experimenting with different synergy teams, all in an effort to figure out exactly where Bishop fits in. This was all made possible thanks to Kabam's content creator program that allowed me temporary access to make this video. I focused on 7 categories when testing Bishop's potential: prestige, synergies for other champions, the feel, the animation fluidity of Bishop, the Alliance quest potential, Alliance war attack potential, Alliance war defense potential, and general questing utility and fun. And if all else fails, he can be used as arena fodder, but let's hope Bishop is a little bit more than that. Starting with Prestige, at rank 5, Signature 200, Bishop's Prestige is 10,410, which ties Voodoo for 9th highest 5-star overall, and also makes Bishop the highest mutant champion in the game. So Bishop passes the Prestige test with flying colors. Let's move on to synergies. I'm mostly concerned with what he can provide for other champions, since even if Bishop turns out to be bad, he'll always have a place in the game if the synergies are there. You'll notice something never seen before here. Most of the synergies are the same, named Energy Conduit. These actually stack for Bishop, but again, I'd rather look at the other champions right now. And they get practically nothing, just a small amount of energy resistance. Not so compelling. Bishop also has a synergy with Psylocke that petrifies the opponent for 1 second after they fill a bar of power, reducing regeneration and power gain by 70%. I found this to be hardly noticeable due to the short duration. I wish it reduced ability accuracy instead, to possibly provide a counter to champions like Magic or Cable that gain abilities upon filling bars of power. But instead, these synergies are incredibly underwhelming, at least for the other champions. We'll come back to those Energy Conduit synergies in a moment, but let's continue down the list for now. Next up is the feel. Does Bishop have smooth animations like Medusa, or is he a bit on the clunky side like Morningstar? The answer is somewhere in between, because of course no one is as smooth as Medusa, but overall his animations feel fluid, and you won't find any obnoxious movement detracting from your enjoyment. He gets a pass here. Moving on to Alliance Quest. The ideal AQ champion has 2 things going for them. 1. Some kind of healing for sustainability, and 2. Either poison or bleed immunity depending on your path. And yes, of course, other things matter too, like power control for certain bosses or anti-evasion for certain fights, but generally it's healing and immunity that I look for first. Bishop actually has both. Sort of. He can heal in a similar way to Blade by holding block. Unlike Blade, however, Bishop's power isn't the resource used for healing. Instead, it's these prowess charges that he gains in various ways. The most reliable way to build prowess is by landing parries, but you can also build charges when hit by energy attacks like Dormammu's punches, and energy abilities like Iceman's Cold Snap. On top of building prowess charges, you'll also be filling up your power meter from energy damage and landing parries too. And here's where it gets interesting. Bishop doesn't come with any immunities by default, but whenever you heal, you'll purify bleed debuffs. This even includes the bleed from the double edge mastery, which is pretty cool. So Bishop is a champion that can heal, that isn't bleed immune, but can shrug off bleeds pretty easily. Not bad, right? Well, I thought so at first, but it turns out this system is flawed in a few ways. Number 1, the heal is weak. Like, really weak. It just doesn't heal enough, in my opinion. Bishop kind of makes up for this with his extremely high block proficiency to help mitigate damage, but still, ugh. Against Caltrops, you'll still be taking some damage before you can hold the block to get rid of the bleed, so yeah, he's not really going to help you in certain bleed immune situations. And then finally, the prowess charges are actually pretty difficult to get and keep up in most cases. Why? Because every time you activate a special attack, it burns all of your prowess charges to deal extra damage. Even when you don't want it to, even when you want to save those prowess charges to do some healing. So yeah, it's not exactly AQ friendly. And because I don't think Bishop has much for boss killing potential, he is not someone I would consider bringing to AQ. Alright, let's move on to Alliance War, starting with attack. So we know Bishop can shrug off the bleed from bleed nodes effectively enough, but healing is kind of weak. What else does this guy have that could make him a potential attacker? A few things. Number 1, Bishop has an extremely high base energy resistance active at all times, greatly reducing the damage of things like Cold Snap and Limbo. Number 2, his special 1 turns your attack into mostly energy damage for 15 seconds, which helps to get around certain damage reflecting abilities like Killmonger's Reverberate or Electro's Static Shock. Which, by the way, Electro's Static Shock deals energy damage, which you resist most of, and you gain power from it, and gain prowess from it. So yeah, Bishop was actually made to counter Electro, in my opinion. He's like the #1 counter to this guy. The only problem is that Electro isn't a big part of the meta these days, so take it for what you will. Another positive about his special 1 is that 40% of the energy damage you deal penetrates their block. So if you attack into their block a lot, you can actually deal decent damage without feeding them much power. But it's more of a bonus than a game changer. And one of the downsides to this energy attack is that although the energy damage isn't reduced by armor, meaning it can deal a little bit extra damage, it can't crit, making Bishop's already fairly low attack damage even lower. I really wish Kabam would change this. What else does Bishop have? Well, I guess we should finally talk about his most unique feature, the ability to carry over energy from the previous fight. Okay, I gotta admit, this ability is freaking awesome. It doesn't matter how you got the energy from the last fight, attacking, getting hit, your synergies that start you off with power, you get to keep all of it. The persistent charge counter here will tell you how many bars of power you have, and your signature ability will actually give you a bonus effect depending on how many bars you start with. It's important to note that Bishop's synergies do count towards this starting power. The only bad part is that these effects could have been a little cooler in my opinion. They aren't useless, but I mean, look at when you start with 1 bar. How often will you need to hold a block to gain stun immunity? Sure, if Quake's aftershocks are expiring, it can be nice, but there are only a small handful of situations I find this to be useful in, and it takes effort and planning ahead to even pull it off. Starting with 0 bars of power could be good for defense. Starting with 2 bars will give a nice boost to your special damage, and 3 bars will start you off having the same energy-based attack buff of Bishop's special 1. But sadly, as cool as this feature of carrying energy over through fights is, I don't consider Bishop to be an Alliance War attacker. His overall utility is just a little too niche with minor exceptions like maybe an Iceman on the Power Shield node for example, but his low damage output makes him a liability in most fights. The one disclaimer I'll add to this category is that I've only been testing with a 4-star champion. It's possible that a 5-star Bishop could prove to be useful against more nodes than I'm thinking, with the additional burst power of his specials and carrying over the energy to those fights. But I doubt he'll get much use on offense. As for Alliance War defense, well, I think he has more potential here. He's not the most difficult champion to counter, but let's say someone takes an Iceman to fight Bishop, thinking that it was going to be a Nightcrawler. Bishop will be reducing damage, gaining power, and potentially firing off unblockable specials because of his Awaken ability. It won't happen every war, but it'll happen enough to consider Bishop a top 50 defender, and with defender diversity, that's good enough. As for the last category of general questing fun, well, I tried going through Monarch's lab with Bishop, and found it to be such a miserable experience that I'd rather just use my Storm to finish things up. Seriously, Bishop's damage is awful. I think Bishop's damage is balanced around the possibility of gaining a ton of prowess charges and unleashing some crazy specials, and I got some pretty good results against their old friend Winter Soldier here, so he is fun in that sense at least. But Kabam has a little bit of an insurance policy to make sure this damage doesn't get too crazy, because Bishop will actually start to take damage if you have a full power meter for 9 or more seconds, or if you have 30 plus prowess charges. I didn't find this to hinder my regular gameplay with Bishop, but when going for max damage specials just for fun, I definitely burned myself on more than one occasion. Another plus for the fun column is that if you max out the energy conduit synergies to screw around on lower level content, it can be pretty fun launching specials as soon as the fight starts. And before testing, I thought he might have some potential to be a legend running champion, but after testing, I don't really think that's viable. So to summarize Bishop, I'd say he's a high prestige, mediocre defender that you can have some fun screwing around with. Oh, and he's probably the best Electro counter I've ever seen if they bring that guy back as a 6-star. Someone go test this dude against the Labyrinth of Legends Electro and tag me in a video on Twitter, because I'd really like to see that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this early review of Bishop. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.